Hello, true believers, and welcome to the Comic Book Club. I am your host, Jamill Payne, and with me, as always, is my co-host, Amanda Comey.
Hey, happy weekend.
Hey, Amanda. So, listeners, I'm about to say readers, listeners, we have a guest today, a special guest. He's a friend of mine, I guess you can call him a friend. We bonded over Power Rangers, and now he has his own comic. Mat Groom, how are you doing, sir?
I'm very well, thank you, Jamill. Thank you for having me, guys.
Oh, don't mention it, man. Like I said, I'm glad you're here. I'm glad, we're here to talk about your comic, which I'm really enjoying right now.
Oh, I'm glad to hear it. It'd be a very open conversation if you hated it.
It would be. In fact, I just brought you on to ambush you to tell you how much I hate it.
Ah, dang. I knew this was going to happen one day. Should have been ready.
So, Matt, if you could you tell the listeners a little bit about you? Like, I know about you.
Yeah.
But could you, explain just who you are and what you do?
For sure. So, my name's Matt. I am a writer from Australia. And in my day job, I work at a creative agency called For the People, where I work as a communication strategist and a writer, and I help sort of brands find their voices for the past 5 years or so. I've also been doing a podcast because people who do podcasts are objectively the best. It's called the Ranger Danger Podcast, where we watch episodes of Power Rangers and then talk to them afterwards. And we've had a few kind of like spin-offs of that. And one of them was us talking about the Power Rangers comics that were released by Boom Studios. And through the course of that, we ended up interviewing the writer of Mighty Morphin Power Rangers, the first one, Kyle Higgins, who we were talking to after every single issue, so once a month for 30 issues, so a couple of years actually. And through that, we became quite close friends, and we talked about story quite a bit. And eventually, he was like, "Oh, you seem to be really into this. You've got great sort of ideas and recommendations. Have you ever thought about writing comics for yourself?" And I said, "Yeah, I tried it a while ago, but it never really worked out for me." And he said, "Oh, you should have another go. Just try writing a script, just a one-issue script, just to see what you can do, for both of us." So I said, "Yeah, all right, I can do that." And I did, and what I wrote was more or less the first issue of Self-Made. So I sent that to him, and he dug it. He's like, "Oh, I think this could really be a series. Do you mind if I be the editor on it and walk it to some publishers?" And I said, "Yeah, dude, of course, absolutely." And yeah, we found an artist named Eduardo Ferragamo, who's amazing, and a colorist who called Marcelo Costa, who had wider nose. And we, took it to Image, and they said, "Yes, please," and here we are.
Cool, man. You guys are... No, I just want to tell you, I didn't tell you this when we seen each other at Power MorphinCon, but you guys are absolutely the reason why I don't do a Power Rangers podcast.
I'm sorry.
No, it's fine. It's fine because I basically had like a similar idea, but then I stumbled upon you guys, and I'm like, well, this, I don't have to do this now. I guess I can go find some other podcast to do because it would just be weird at that point.
Look, I've got to say, I feel like I took a bullet for you there, buddy. It's very fun, but it is also a bit of an endurance contest as well. So
the existential crisis that you and Michael have every week
on the regular, yeah. It really breaks us down.
It got pretty bad. I think like during like season 3, I think was like the dark times in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
Jamill had me rewatch some Power Rangers earlier this year when we read those comics. And I remember commenting that when the Green Ranger showed up, it was just so refreshing to finally have a break from literally exactly the same formula for every single episode. I couldn't even tell if the episodes were better. I was just so happy they were different.
It's actually kind of amazing that they made the same show literally every week. Like, I know that a lot of shows have a formula, but this was like carbon copy. And I think, like, people look back at Mighty Morphin Power Rangers in particular and think, yeah, it was great. I watched the episodes. It was a good time. And they forget that it's about 300 episodes long. It's like like a dozen traditional seasons of television, and it's all basically the same. So it's a lot to go through. But look, without the craziness of Power Rangers, I wouldn't be where I am. So.
Well, on this show, we have two things that we try to avoid. Power Rangers is one, and Dragon Ball Z is the other.
We can talk way too long about both of those.
Yeah, look, I can see some similarities. I think they're both great and also sort of problematic story-wise at the same time. So.
Oh boy, you have no idea. So Matt, so tell us, where did you come up with the idea for this company? Before we dive into the story, where did you come up with the idea for this? It's very unique, especially after the first issue, and you get to the ending that we'll talk about. Spoilers for the first two issues, by the way.
Sure.
Where did this idea come from?
Well, I think it was really just from playing video games, probably too much, I'd say, and thinking about the perspective of non-player characters. And originally I had this idea of doing the story from the perspective of a non-player character and having it be a bit more of a comedy that comes from the dramatic irony of us knowing that the lead character is a player, us the audience, but the main character not knowing that this person is a human and she's a video game. And I thought it could be funny, but I think it just, as my nature is, it just became progressively more earnest. And I started to think about what it would be like to realize that you're a creation and have the possibility of meeting your creator. And the more I got into that, the more it sort of felt universal. Both two, there's definitely a parent-child analogy there. There's a looking for meaning in spirituality sort of aspect to it. And then there's also an aspect that I think really hit home for me specifically, which is there's an aspect of creativity to it, of exploring the ideas of creativity in when you create something, how much responsibility do you have for it? Can you create something and then send it off into the world to have it be its own thing, or do you have a responsibility to sort of maintain it and provide upkeep for it and make sure that nobody uses it in the wrong way? And all of these questions or sort of themes don't really have any solid answers. And to me, that's when I feel like I know I've got something that I can talk about at length and really get into, because when there's no easy answers, that means there's stuff to explore and find a specific perspective on.
Okay, cool. So, that ending, now, now, just from my perspective, right? I hit you up. You gave me the first 4 issues, which thank you. So
you're welcome.
I was reading it and I was worried because it wasn't bad, but I was like, wow, this is generic is the wrong word, but standard. Wow, this is really standard. This is Arcadia. I'm pretty sure I've read 1 million books with that fantasy name for a magical city. This is kind of it's fine, but it's not Then you get to the ending, which when you find out that it's a video game, and it puts everything else in perspective, and all of a sudden it becomes way better in hindsight. That ending makes the subsequent pages better. And again, it wasn't bad, it wasn't terrible or anything, but it makes that better. It really does. Once you realize, oh, it's a video game. Video games are kind of generic. Yeah. That's why it's like this. Was that intentional, or did I just insult you?
Oh, no, 100%. Okay. But also, it's tough. And that's one of the aspects of it that I don't know myself if it was the right choice still, necessarily, right? I think because, I make the mistake of reading all the reviews, and most of them, fortunately, have been very supportive, but the more critical ones have been a bit well, you should have skipped the generic and shit bit and got to the interesting bit. And I get that, but also it's going to be increasingly important going forward, understanding the world Amala came from and how that sort of informs her perspective on where she's going from here on out. And to me, if we're going to have true empathy for this person who has their entire existence stripped away, you kind of need to live it with her and have it stripped away in the same way yourself. So yeah, like absolutely intentional. I think it's tough too, because I wanted to use sort of how sort of stereotypical the world was to provide some contrast to for Bryce Mere, in that he plays the role of a typical knight, but obviously he's a real shit, and that's not what you think of necessarily as like the knight in shining armor. So I wanted to sort of like have him feel even more out of place by providing something incredibly familiar. And I think part of it too is like there's a lot of trying to build into it as much little hints along the way, so that we don't want to give the game away, obviously, but we also don't want to make it feel unearned or like we cheated you. We want to feel like if you go back and reread, you're like, oh, actually, yeah, I can kind of see the seeds for this now. And things like Arcadia, like I think there's 2 levels to that, which is, yeah, it's a very common generic name, but also it has arcade in it, which kind of seemed like a very...
Oh my God.
Yeah.
I didn't realize.
Which, like, when I wrote that, I was like, is that too much? But, like, I feel like I kind of got away with it in the end.
It's a comic book. You can't go too far.
Yeah. Look, that's exactly my perspective. I couldn't agree more. Like, just go for it in all aspects. So, yeah. Again, like, I don't know, ultimately, if... I think once people have read the whole thing, I think they'll definitely generally have a bit more of a favorable view of the first issue. But I also understand people who say, like, yeah, but I had to pay for the first issue without any other material. And, I can see both sides.
That trip to that end of that issue is very much worth it in my point of view.
Yeah, I'm glad you think so. Thank you.
Amanda, you got anything you want to add? Say? About
Yeah, I definitely had a question about your female programmer character.
Yeah.
I wanted to know if she was based on real observations of women working in environments where they're mostly the only lady, because her reactions seemed very real to me, and I've worked in an environment where I didn't have to share any of the bathroom stalls with anyone else on my floor.
Oh wow.
And I saw a lot of that just seemed surprisingly plausible, her sort of antisocial reactions, and then contrasting that with her being like, you know, essentially she's a horrible person who barely functions, and she created like another person somehow who does function. So I was hoping you had like some really clever, insightful anecdote about how that came around, but
well, it's not anything like super specific. I guess like with any character, I try and synthesize a bunch of different things without shaving too much of the specifics off. But I work with a woman named Amanda at our creative agency. Like, thankfully, we've got a pretty solid gender balance at our agency. But Amanda in particular is someone who I've always been incredibly impressed by how driven she is and committed to furthering the social cause for women in particular in the office, despite the fact that it kind of shouldn't be her responsibility. You know what I mean? Like, it should be everyone's. But she really takes that on board herself. And the fact that she does it while still being an incredibly nice person is always kind of amazing to me, because she's so patient. Obviously, there's not so much of that in Rebecca, But I took from Amanda that ability to just push on, just like in the face of some sort of entrenched cultural things in industries. And then I think the other element that really informs Rebecca is a pretty, I think, something that people are generally familiar with, and that's the type of people who are so committed to their work that they shut out everything else. And I think working in the creative industry, you do see a lot of people who don't have work-life balance at all, and in fact don't see work-life balance as a positive thing. They see work-life balance as compromising half the time and then not getting back to the work sooner. Whereas in Rebecca, she's very much chasing something very specific in what she's trying to create in the world. And I think that there's, as much as that creates as a pretty abrasive person, the reason that hopefully Rebecca is still likable is because there is something admirable about someone who can commit their entire life to something. And like, we can appreciate that it's not healthy, but also appreciate that, you might be the only sort of person who can do like truly groundbreaking things, because the rest of us actually want to kind of live and enjoy our lives and not go crazy. And maybe we do need the people who are super intense and kind of sacrifice their own lives in a way to sort of create things. But yeah, I think it's always really interesting with Rebecca trying to find the balance, because I was always of the perspective that we don't need her to be nice to other people for her to be likable. All we need for her to be likable is for her to be doing something that we support, essentially, even if it comes at a cost for her and a cost for other people. And I think because we start with Amala and hopefully we like Amala, we can always come back to, well, ultimately, whether she knew it or not, she was trying to create Amala, and that's a good thing. So we're on board with that.
Now, let me ask you, as far as Amara's tribe go, I know you're Australian.
Yes.
And I don't know much about the Aborigines people, but is Amara tribe at all based on anything that you might have seen, like, in your life living in Australia?
No, not at all, to be honest.
Okay.
In fact, specifically, with that, like, no, I totally understand why you'd ask that.
Because I don't know, like...
Oh, yeah. To me, it was important to make sure that I wasn't just pulling straight from one particular culture. One reason for that is, like, not super my place to be the person who breaks Aboriginal culture into comics properly, because I feel like there's a lot of very interesting stories to be told there, but I might not be the one to do it. But I think the other element, too, of it was, and this may kind of be a cop-out answer, I haven't even decided myself, but to me, this game company isn't great. And I always felt like they wouldn't be creating a culture that was like a fantastic and educational representation of the world. They'd just do something they saw as cool that they thought people would buy.
Yeah, I've read the 3rd and 4th issues already, and seeing the other game that they play, it doesn't make. I'm like, how's this company making money?
You see, Amanda read ahead. I'm trying to keep myself pure, so I'm trying to read it like slowly. So I haven't read the other 2 issues, but okay, cool.
Well, without spoiling, I can say that to that point there, we definitely wanted to create a synthesis of video games in both of those 2 games and have it feel like it's not based on one particular game, but it should also feel like kind of every game you've played before.
Oh, yeah.
And I think seeing that happen in that science fiction setting a little bit later, I hope we'll recontextualize Arcadia and happy to go back to that and go, oh, yeah, it does kind of feel the same way. And it's like a bunch of fancy stuff I've seen before and not anything specific and nothing that I'm going to write home about, but authentic in that it feels like everything else.
Well, I did get a bit of a Horizon Zero Dawn feel a little bit in the first issue.
Oh, yeah.
Just a little bit, not much, but like I did get that feeling a little bit, as in like, because if you ever play Horizon Zero Dawn, it's not one culture, but it's all the cultures. Which when it's all the cultures, it's nothing specific, so it comes off as kind of like not offensive, but again, like you said, like kind of like lowest common denominator in a way. You know what I'm saying?
For sure.
So
yeah, I think part of the problem too we had was that Eduardo's too good. Like he couldn't help but put specific cool styling into everything and make it feel almost probably a little more specific than I was going for in my head. And I'm glad he did, because honestly, that probably would have been going too far into the territory of making it intentionally not great and then creating a not great comic as part of that process. I think he made it cool enough that it's fun enough that you can sort of get to the main story and then be like, oh, okay, I see what they were doing, instead of like flicking through the first couple of pages and like, oh, this sucks. So
one more technical comment while you're talking about getting some quality art out there. The lettering, specifically for that sci-fi video game, there was some fun stuff going on. Who did the lettering?
So that's Troy Pateri. And he works for a lettering studio he created called The Larger World. And Troy is he's a master. And he, like, just so incredibly worldly and experienced in lettering. I think actually our relationship with Troy was the one that took the most work in getting to where it needed to be. And that was entirely our fault. That was all on our end. Because we initially asked for some pretty, like, out there stuff with the lettering. We had some ideas that we could differentiate between the different worlds a lot with the lettering and go really all out with it. And he said to us, like, oh, yeah, look, I don't know, but I want to try it. And like, yeah. So, like, he did a bit of it, and then we started like, oh, yeah, you're right. It's actually hard to read and more distracting than anything. I think where so much of Troy's genius comes in is that he's so incredibly solid that you barely notice what he's doing when he's doing it, because it feels so authentic to the situation. So it's a pretty standard, like regular conversation way of handling it. But as soon as those little nuances come in, he is able to tweak them in these small ways that really complements the dialogue. Like, I'm a big fan of using a lot of, like, little dialogue things to sort of replicate a real situation, like whispering or shouting or talking over other people or, like, sort of speaking while running or a whole bunch of different things. And he's able to use his lettering to create very bespoke solutions to all of that stuff that just slips seamlessly right in. And you don't really notice that it's all kind of like really specifically hand done to that situation because it all looks so professional, if that makes sense. So, I've just been so blown away by Troy.
Okay, so I guess we should talk about some of her coworkers. I guess specifically, what's his name?
Bryce?
Bryce, yes. That's by the way, that is the most douchiest white man name ever.
Isn't it just? I kind of went down a list, and when I got to Bryce, I'm like, Bryce. That's it. That's perfect.
Yes. He's a real asshole. Is he drawn to, like, I don't know, is he drawn to look like your standard, like, lead character? I guess.
Did you look up that, like, aggregate Chris photo where they just blend all of the Chris's together?
Not specifically, but that makes a lot of sense now that you say it. I can say with Bryce sort of visually, I definitely asked for, like, just give me the white knight. Like, give me the stereotypical but boring hero. And when I sort of described his personality and then sent Eduardo through the scripts, Eduardo said, "Oh, I know this guy." And I was like, "Oh, you have the sort of sense of who this guy is?" He's like, "No, you don't understand. I've met this person." And he just drew this person. And, like, I've never asked for the name because I'd be terrified that I'd accidentally reveal it. But apparently some point in Eduardo's life, he met a man that is exactly like Bryce and now looks exactly like Bryce. So I'm hoping he never reads the comic and looks at it and he's like, oh god, that's me. Or maybe it's good. Maybe he reads it and has some self-reflection. He's like, oh, am I like this? Do I need to grow?
Well, you worry. I know you said you worry about whether your main character will be likable or not. I think the way you make them likable is by making everybody around her absolutely terrible.
Much worse? Yeah, absolutely.
just by default, you can't help but root for her because at least she's not this dickhead over here.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. But even with Bryce, I start with the empathy, because for Bryce, he's just been very privileged and fortunate, but from his perspective, that has meant he has achieved a lot, and that means he's good. And unfortunately, that's not a super uncommon thing. I think that's something that a lot of white people have to deal with to varying degrees of success in their life. And obviously, Bryce isn't like a good example of how to deal with it because he just internalizes it and ignores it and moves on. But I think it's good to sort of like examine that stuff for yourself and maybe even try and learn from it a bit yourself as you're writing, because it's a very easy arrogance to slip into. And even like taking it away specifically from race, I think anybody who has privilege of whatever sort can probably empathize with how easy it is to convince yourself that it is all because of what you've done and not because of what you've been given by the world. And it's a fine line to walk between making it a caricature and making it genuine. So I'm hoping that I got to a place where he's an arsehole, but not like so much of an arsehole that it's unrealistic. Unfortunately, you can imagine people like this existing in the world.
Well, I didn't hate him as much. I mean, clearly he was like kind of a shithead. Yeah. I didn't hate him as much until like she asked for his help, and he immediately tried to get her things scrapped. Then I was like, oh god, you see, that's what I get for not hating you completely from the get go.
Well, I guess from Bryce's perspective, he is working for this game company, and his job is to help games get out and make sure the company's running smoothly. And he saw in Rebecca a problem, and specifically in what Rebecca had created a problem. And he needed to know exactly what she had done to solve the problem. And to his mind, what he did was act in the best interest of the company by finding out the information, reporting it to the person he's responsible to report to, and have it dealt with. So even then, to Bryce, he's doing the right thing. And I wanted to make sure that he wasn't ever just being an arsehole for being an arsehole's sake. He could always rationalize it to himself. But also, yes, I agree. That's definitely the moment where he turns a corner and makes a pretty horrific decision that kind of sets him on a path for later down the track.
So, I want to talk about the setting of this. I'm not talking about within the game setting. This world, so I'm assuming this is the future, right?
Yep.
Okay. You know how far into the future does it say? Did I miss that somewhere? Or
no, we kept that a little open. We've never said specifically. You'll see a lot more of the world outside in issue 4, and there's some context clues, I think, but we never laid it out. We definitely sort of looked at the world economically and politically and projected that forward a few decades. And we looked at the world environmentally and we projected that forward a few decades. But because we were dealing with technology that's pretty far ahead of where we're at now, even though we can see a lot of parallels in today's world, I didn't want to lock it down and be like, in 20 years this will happen. Because, like Blade Runner set in 2019 and that didn't really shake out. So,
I'm still waiting for my flying car.
Yeah, look, we've still got another 11 and 3/4 months, so we'll see.
Well, you're talking about what world it's set in. I do kind of like this story as almost like this is the first example of humanist robot science fiction I can think of that doesn't follow Asimov's 3 laws. Because the premise here, literally the premise here is that she's an AI that's willing to hurt a human.
Yes.
So it's like, straight off the bat, it's like, okay, we're going to do an Asimov-style sci-fi thing to start out with, but no 3 laws. We're going to throw those away. We don't need them.
That was very conscious because, like, we both, Eduardo and I both love Asimov. You'll notice actually in issue 2 on Rebecca's desk, she actually has a photo of Isaac Asimov. So we wanted to, like, tip our hat to it, but also do something else. Because as you said, it's well-trodden ground, right? But
yeah.
I wanted to sort of get away from it being a robot specifically. Because I think what, it's in so many ways not Isaac Asimov. But one of the many ways I'm not is that I don't have that technical expertise and ability to project in the technology sense. So I wanted to have Amala be AI, the plot, but not necessarily the story. Mm-hmm. We're not really exploring the technological implications so much. We are really more getting into what it means to be a creator and a creation in kind of a grander sense. And I guess that's why we wanted to kind of set aside the technology debate of it, because it's been done, and I'm not the right person to sort of get into it. Well, and I don't think it would really serve any.
Well, like, I keep comparing this to other stuff, but, like, her, I don't know what you would call it, but her test to see, Truman test or whatever, to see it have, like, the AI, like, reach sentience. Number one, that's fucking hardcore. That's, like, some Deer Hunter type shit. And to see if your AI, and it kind of reminded me of Westworld when they was testing for fidelity in the robots, if you ever seen that. And I'm like, oh, this reminds me, I'm pretty sure that wasn't intentional, but it just reminds me, like, I think there's something in the air now about testing AI in that type, in it, like, I think we just reached that point in our society.
Yeah. I mean, like, I haven't seen Westworld yet. I've always meant to, right? And I started on Self-Made, and people kept saying, oh, it's kind of like Westworld. And because of that, I stayed away from it until I'm done, just because I don't want to kind of cross-pollinate. But, yeah, you're absolutely right. It's definitely in the air. And it was important to us that we don't... Yeah, it's a tough one because obviously there's a lot of people who have done this before, and we wanted to find our own spin on it. And I guess, like I was saying before, we definitely wanted to sort of have it be about technology, but not about technology. So when we got to the testing stuff, I actually looked at the animal kingdom more for inspiration rather than technology in terms of figuring out sentience, and was looking at how scientists decide if an animal is sentient. And the answer to that, broadly speaking, is they don't really do that because sentience isn't something we really have a scientific classification for. But there are a few different definitions of it and a few different ways they test for it. So one of the tests, the first one actually that Rebecca gets Amal to do, is called the mirror self-recognition test, which is basically they put a dot on an animal's face and then put them in front of a mirror. And then if that animal touches that dot on their own face, it proves to the scientists that at very least that animal can see what's in the mirror and recognize it as themselves, not another animal, because they're seeing something that they could only see in the mirror, but recognizing that it's on themselves. So that was kind of like step one of that. But from there, yeah, it gets a little more violent.
Did you end up going down the YouTube video of, like, birds solving puzzles and, like, I don't know. Yeah. That's something I spent a week doing, was watching videos of parrots and crows solving, like, puzzle boxes and, like, getting treats and, like, picking up colored things off of trays. And
Yeah, I certainly got a very much increased appreciation for crows. I learned actually a lot more about crows than probably I needed to for writing a comic book that featured 0 crows. But I learned some stuff that really wigged me out, like about how crows allegedly can identify specific people and then communicate enough to other crows that those second crows can identify that same person despite never having seen them. So if a crow's like, oh, this human always stops and feeds me, a crow can be like, hey, look out for this guy that drives this car. He feeds you. And then that second crow will go and find this person to get food.
Yeah, so we heard it here first. Your next book's going to be about crows, right?
Yeah, I mean, at this point, I don't think I can stop myself.
It'll be like a Watership Down type story, but instead of rabbits, it's birds.
Yeah.
Well, look, you've talked me into it. This is breaking news. My next story will be about crows.
And just to end on this issue too, it seems about to get very exciting because it seems like you're going into since you're going into games, I want to say it's like you're going into Destiny. I know it's not Destiny, but from the way they explained it, it was like a massive multiplayer game that there's a lot of shooting. And
there's definitely a lot of shooting. It's actually unlike Arcadia, there's only going to be 3 people in this game. It's going to be Amala, it's going to be Rebecca, and it's going to be Bryce. So probably a little closer to like Overwatch or something if I were to draw some comparisons.
Okay.
But also there's a lot of like Doom sprinkled in there as well, and well, maybe a little Halo, a lot of like typical science fiction space marine kind of stuff.
I mean, Halo and Guild of War is about generic sci-fi as you can get. So, yeah. Oh, you know what? Maybe I shouldn't have said that. I'm really going to anger some like Halo and Guild of War fans. But
I think you can appreciate it and still recognize that. You know what I mean? Like up in Halo, probably 3, I guess. Actually, enjoyed the Halo games well enough, and I played the Gears of War games, and I think they're probably, if anything, getting progressively better and more nuanced in their storytelling. But I think you can appreciate that, but also be aware that it's very much built on the shoulders of what's come before.
Yeah. So, this is a personal question for me. This is as a Ranger Danger fan, I'd like to know what work did Michael do on this? Because, I hear him talk about it all the time, and he seemed just as stressed as you.
Yeah. Well, look, Michael being stressed is just his life, unfortunately. He's a guy who worries about everything, and honestly, in a very loving and caring way. Generally, he just wants the best for everyone and everything. In this one, it was working with Michael less than I probably traditionally would in terms of the story. We talked about the story a little bit, but it was really more me and Kyle in terms of sort of breaking the story. But Michael is the designer on the series. So he has been doing all the production design. So the credits pages and the upcoming letters columns will be all him. And he's played a big role in sort of just helping the production along. So helping getting the files from Eduardo and Marcelo, sort of converting them to the right files and getting them to image, helping prepare the trade dress. So we actually had our logo designed by a designer friend of mine named Liv. But he took Liv's logo and created some other extra elements and is responsible for creating all of the elements on the cover every issue. And just generally, he's kind of the one who helps make sure that the book is completely finished and gets to the printer on time. So yeah, he's been a massive help, but it hasn't been quite the traditional sort of story relationship that we might normally have.
Okay, so I guess we'll take this time to segue. You talked about you writing a female protagonist and how to keep her likable while being absolutely unlikable, and I think that segues perfectly into I Kill Giants.
That's actually so. Yeah, that's something. I reread I Kill Giants last night for this, and I never connected the dots, but I was like, oh wow, I'm sure I picked some stuff up from this, because in my mind, the lead character of I Kill Giants is very likable. But reading through, it's like, oh, she's actually, like, terrible to everybody around her. And even her intelligence is weaponized in that really shitty young person who has to prove to everybody else that they're clever way. And the fact that you still come out of it being like, oh, she's great and a hero, is, definitely something that a lot of writers can learn from. And clearly, I hope I learned a little bit.
So, Amanda, what did you think of I Kill James? As we start with you this time.
Okay. So I really enjoyed reading this. I got kind of an overall kind of a Miyazaki vibe from it. Just sort of like a really melancholy coming of age, sort of ambiguous story. Like it doesn't, I wouldn't say like I felt good after I read it, but I would absolutely tell other people to read this book so they can feel whatever this emotion is that we don't have a word for.
Is it crying? Because
there were like three like exceptionally large tears.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think anything that can kind of pack that emotional punch so efficiently. Gosh, we don't have words for this. That's why it had to be drawn out in 100-something pages. But my actual first thought on getting a copy of the book was, is this the Deadpool Joe Kelly?
Yeah.
Is it?
I think so.
I know. Yeah, I think, yes, it is.
Okay, checking. Because every now and then, knowing who the writer is will influence your opinion. And this was one where I was like, oh,
yes,
Joe Kelly. And I'm like, oh, it's like a little punk rock girl at the beginning. And then it kept going, and I was like, I don't think this is the same guy. But it totally is.
Yeah, absolutely. It like, definitely confirmed for me that he has a lot of range. And I think because, like, from comics, he moved, as my understanding is, into children's animation, largely. And, like, I got it reading this. It's like, okay, yeah, like, he's action, but also there's nothing about Joe Kelly that needs to be, like, quote-unquote mature or violent or, like, crass.
Mm-hmm.
He has strong storytelling instinct, and obviously he's very keen to the human experience. And yeah, like, this is definitely demonstrated to me that he has a real range. At any time, it's just kind of fun and dumb with Joe Kelly that's entirely intentional and not a lack of abilities.
But I mean, maybe this is maybe that just reinforces the connection that you and Jamill were making about having a really likable protagonist who is objectively not a great person. Like, people love Deadpool, but, like, Deadpool doesn't really behave in a way that would make anyone like him. And yet...
Oh, no, he's a heroic.
Right.
He's, well, yeah.
He's a monster.
Yeah, he's not a good person, I guess I said. Yeah.
But so I guess we shouldn't be surprised that he can create another character like that. I'm just surprised that I was crying at the end.
Sure. Yeah. Me too.
Well, okay, so look, I don't really like to dive into my personal life too much. And I like to give like an austere that I'm cool and tough, right? Guys, there's a lot of me in this book, and I didn't think it was going to be like that. Like, seriously, like, man, I want to thank you, because, like, I've never read this. I've had it for like years. I've never read it, and you know, I was kind of this girl. Well, I wasn't a girl, but I was kind of like this girl at that age.
Yeah.
And I've said this before. I was raised by my grandfather, and he died when I was 17 of cancer. So. And very much like this, where like, you know, his last few months was spent in the bed in the house, and you know, I'll just go talk to him. So like towards the end of this, I didn't expect it to hit me like it did, and I was just bawling. And like, you know, even stuff I like anytime something make me feel something, I like to joke about it, just to get the feels out, like you know, just like, oh, this is too emotional, I need to crack a joke. I couldn't even have the words to how much this book affected me at the end, because I know what it's like, I know what it feels like. Not that you need that like context per se, but just for me, man, it really, like, and just being like a little girl, being just a kid that imaginative, and nobody really understanding you or gets you, and think you're some type of weirdo, dealing with bullies, and it really did something for me. And like, this book is really something special. I apparently it won a bunch of awards, so I shouldn't be surprised.
Yeah, it's like one thing to hear something, read a bunch of awards, but different to read it and have it speak to you specifically. And I'm so glad it did, and I'm glad you had a chance to read it there. And like, obviously you've got.
I didn't mean to bring the room down. I did not mean to bring the room down.
Oh no, like, honestly, like, it's not a bad thing, and to me that's the kind of the message at the end, right? Is that like, when it comes to facing death, it's not like, it's always going to be sad, but it's not something that we need to like avoid or sort of just repress. We can be strong enough to face it and talk about it and live with how sad it is. And that is actually the best way to be, because when you can live with it beside you, you're able to experience all the things that you'd otherwise be repressing and shutting out. Like, obviously at the end, it's about being able to spend time with her mother and have conversations and moments of tenderness that otherwise would have been completely missing from her life, and she would have missed out on entirely. And I think like that's a very specific microcosm of like right now, if we sort of like avoided the topic of how heavy it is because it's heavy, then I think we'd be doing each other and the listeners a bit of a disservice, because it is powerful, and we don't need to make a joke to diffuse it. It's genuinely moving, and I'm glad we're able to talk about it.
So, you know, we just jumped to the end. I think we should like rewind it a bit.
Yeah, for sure.
Like, cause like the end is so powerful, but
yeah.
Did you guys? Let me ask both of you guys this: did any one of you like realize what was going on?
I thought something was going on. I thought maybe it was like Stand By Me, where her older brother had died or her father had died, and that's why they kept talking about him not being there. Maybe it says something about me that I didn't notice Mom was missing, just in terms of like the role that mothers play in stories sometimes. But
yeah,
I figured something was up, but I didn't know exactly what.
Yeah, it's tough for me because I read this. Well, God, it must be something like 10 years ago. I'm not quite sure, but a long time. Oh, actually, that's the label on it, 2010. So yeah, almost 10 years ago. And I have sort of vague memories of my first experience, but I'm fairly sure I had some idea that something was going on, but definitely not the specifics of it. And I think I actually had assumed that the mother had died before the events of the story, and that the dad had left because of that. And obviously that's not quite the case, but also not entirely off track either.
So if I had one complaint about this book, and it's a very minor complaint, is like, it's definitely the Stephen King book of bullies. As in bullies being completely psychotic with no...
Yeah, for sure.
With no, like, you know, you've ever read a Stephen King book or seen a Stephen King movie, like, the bullies are really extreme, like, they pull switchblades on you and gonna cut you. Like, you know, if something didn't stop you well, you were just gonna murder this kid. So
Yeah.
So like I got like a really strong vibe of that. Just not even strong. It was just like it was kind of surprising how brutal that girl was.
Or
I
was
think
that
too,
just what she thought? Right? Like, did
yeah,
it
for
maybe
sure.
just seem that brutal to the little girl?
It's definitely so hard to know what literally happened. But also, I guess better the point of it is, it doesn't matter what literally. This whole book is what it felt like was happening, and if it felt that extreme, it was that extreme at least emotionally to her at the time. But yeah, I guess I totally get what you mean, Jamill. Just because, like, as a kid, it doesn't take a lot for a bully to really mess you up. So it doesn't. You don't need to have the shit beaten out of you to be really shaken up. So I do feel like it probably could have been a little less intense. But yeah, I also agree that like it absolutely could just be an emotional representation of what's going on, and in that context, it's perfect.
So
It was also a little bit more of, and this is based on some observations I had as a student teacher. It was a little bit more of how boys fight than how girls fight.
Yeah.
So it wasn't like, Carrie style, like she walks into the locker room and there's like,
tampons
stuff.
everywhere.
Yeah, stuff written like all over the lockers and everyone's like quiet and giggling and pointing. It was a known bully who was like physically attacking her for like no reason. It wasn't, she wasn't like excluded from someone's Instagram story and then crying over it.
Yeah.
Which is fine. It just, the emotional truth of it is still there.
Yeah.
I'm just like, I don't know if I only ever saw girls hit each other like, once, and that was a big deal.
We have to talk about the monster at the end. It seems like maybe there are real monsters because it seems like Sophia and the bully sees the monster, but I'm not really for sure.
Mm-hmm.
At first, I thought, oh, it's all in her imagination, but then Sophia says, "Go, go, Barbara, go," and I'm like, "Shit, is she really is fighting a monster?" Like, I'm not for sure. Like they leave it very open ended. Just
Yeah, I think that's exactly it, right? Like, I think it intentionally blurs the line, and we're not supposed to know. Or rather, like, we have all the information that we need. It doesn't matter what, quote-unquote, really happened, because obviously it's fiction, none of this really happened, but it was real enough to her that it felt real. And I think, too, like, you could really go either way on her friend of, like, was she supporting her friend in her stories because she thought that would be the best way to help her sort of, like, process, or did she actually see a giant? And at the end of the day, I think both things mean that in one way or another she believes in her friend, and that's kind of the same thing, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Neither of you have seen the movie, right?
No. Have you?
I tried.
I haven't. But I'm wondering if the movie leaves it more or less ambiguous, because I feel like I feel like comic books can be abstract in a way that movies can't.
Definitely.
And reading this, I'm actually kind of surprised that someone said, "Oh, this would make a great movie," because I feel like this is the sort of story that does better as a comic book, and does better as a comic book than a movie, and also better as a comic book than like a novel or prose.
Yes.
So I'm kind of like, I kind of want to be there for the sales pitch to hear somebody be like, "Yeah, we're gonna make this super great feel good adventure story about cancer and death and giants and bullies and maybe cutting and other mental health issues, and it'll be great." There was a similar movie that came out, I want to say around the same time as I Kill Giants would have been in theaters.
No, it came out last year. I know the movie. I cannot think of his name, but I know exactly what movie you're talking about.
A Monster Calls.
Yes.
And I saw that, and that I was alone in the theater, which is a tragedy because I ugly cried from like the first 10 minutes all the way through until the following morning. And that was a very similar story, but it was a little boy, and it was is it Felicity Jones from Rogue One as the mom who's dying, and then it was Liam Neeson was like a talking tree, and it was just that was so hard to watch. So I don't know, how do you sell people on a story that's important but doesn't feel good?
Go ahead, man. Go ahead.
I guess like what I'd say is, when a story makes me cry, more often than not, it's not because it's just sad. It's because it's beautiful and happy as well. Like, I know, to spoil Up for anyone who hasn't seen Up, everybody, have you guys seen Up?
Of course.
Yeah.
Of course.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, so like I get a bit teary in that opening scene that everybody talks about, and yes, it's amazing. But what gets me every time is when he finds a book or photo album and opens it up and sees the message from Ellie that says, "You were my adventure." And like, I every time I'm just like bawling my eyes, because like, yes, it's sad, but also it's really beautiful and sweet. And I think too, that's how I would sell I Kill Giants, is like, yeah, it's, but ultimately at the end, it's very beautiful and very optimistic about the nature of humanity. And it's like, it's on paper a bit of a downer because it is about death very much, but ultimately, like, I come away feeling better about death and feeling a little bit more optimistic about humanity and people having read it. So that'd be my part of my studio pitch, at least.
I will say this, more movies like this should be made. I feel like they made movies like this in the 80s for kids, and they don't really do it anymore. So even though these movies tend not to make any money, I'm glad somebody is still making them. So anything else about this story? Anybody want to?
I guess it's... Oh, no, you go.
I was going to say that I really loved the artwork. I know you and I can be a bit superficial in our appreciation of we've read things just because they were pretty.
Prometheus.
Prometheus was an interesting conversation. But I found that there was something just like every single line here was simultaneously like relaxed and anxious.
Yeah.
In a way where it really just kind of toes that line where you look at it and you see the lines, but you also see the picture. I don't know how to describe how some artists do that so well. But it was really, really masterfully done. And then it also had sort of a, I wasn't comparing it to Studio Gilby just in tone. It does have just a slight look of manga in some of the character design. And it's just such a different looking book that I'm so glad I picked it up and got to take a look at really art.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, because I was going to mention the art is like my big thing as well. And what you described as like that very anxious feeling, I think, is such an important part of the book. And what really makes me appreciate it is that it's definitely a choice, because when you get to the end of the book and you have that beautiful single page of when she walks in and sees her mother, and it's once she's kind of accepted what she's doing, it's actually very beautiful and serene, and nothing about that page is anxious at all. Like, none of it has that intense, almost mania to it. It is just peaceful and beautiful, which just reinforces to me that the rest of the time, it definitely was intentional to create something that, while still very beautiful and like exciting to look at, had an energy of someone who was just like really on the edge of something traumatic. So I was blown away by the whole thing.
Okay, I think that's a good ending spot. Again, Matt, I want to thank you for coming on to our little show.
Honestly, this has been so fun. I'm so glad I did it. So thank you very much for having me.
You're so glad you did. So you're trying to say you wasn't for sure if you was going to do it, like you wasn't for sure about it. I understand. No, I kid.
When I say that, I'm referring exclusively to the fact that I woke up at 6 a.m. and there's very little in the world that I can genuinely believe is worthwhile doing that for in the moment. But kind of like getting up to exercise, I'm glad I did in retrospect.
Well, I specifically woke up at 3:00 this morning just to confirm today, because I was.
All right, well, you win. you put in the hard work.
I was like, okay, I gotta talk to Matt, but I know like when I'm here in Atlanta, I like, oh well, it's 3:00 in the morning. I think it's 7 p.m. there. I think this is a good time to contact them because I. But no,
you got across the time zones in a way that I really still struggle with. So nice work on that one.
So, all right, I think this. No, wait, man. I actually wanted to ask you a few questions not related to any of this. I think I should have asked you this at the beginning.
Yeah.
How did you get into comic books, just as a reader?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I've kind of always been into comics as a kid, but in Australia, they were very hard to come by, actually. Weirdly enough, do you guys know the Phantom, the superhero? Yeah, like Billy Zane, Slam Evil, that guy. The Phantom comics were everywhere in Australian newsagents, so I had ready access to that, but I didn't love it. But despite the fact that I didn't love it, I'd still pick it up semi-regularly. But then I saw Batman the Animated Series on television and loved that and would race home from school every day to watch that. And I specifically saw Batman Mask of the Phantasm, the animated movie, that probably specifically is what inspired me to be a storyteller, because it just broke my heart when I was 7 years old expecting a fun action time and instead got a romantic trend. I was like, oh, I want to make people feel like this. So after that, I needed more Batman, so I had to seek out a comic store, which meant going to the next town over and finding a record store that had a comic section in its basement. And there I found some Grant Morrison JLA trades, and not knowing how comics worked, kind of jumped in the middle. And yeah, from then on, I never stopped. I loved it. And actually only recently figured out, I think part of I love comics. Definitely it's part of it's the collaboration. I love working with other people, and I love visual art despite being terrible at it. So that's very convenient. But in learning about storytelling and storytelling structure as part of my day job, and then obviously in trying to educate myself as a writer, understanding that story really is just sequencing. It's just putting things in a certain order to achieve a reaction from people. And comics allow to get into the sequencing and hit the sequences in a way that's more pure than I think just about any other medium. Because when you're writing a book, obviously you're needing to provide a lot of extra context. You need to walk everyone through exact details in an exact order. And when you're in film, you can't just jump around moment to moment because it's disorientating and uncomfortable because you can't control the speed. So if someone's going to get in and drive away in a car, you need to show them opening the door, sitting down, key in the ignition, turning, etc., and driving away. Whereas in comics, if the moment a story was they leave in the car, you just have a single image of the car drive. That's the pure moment of story that you needed for that sequence. And yeah, I've just become obsessed with how comics are so distilled and pure storytelling in that sense. So yeah, I guess that's why I love comics. I really rabbled there, huh? I'm very into comics, I guess, is the point of this, ultimately.
No. So, do you have anything like? Are you reading anything currently that you like? Like anything recent?
Well, I've about a year ago I started a pull list at my local comic shops. I've been reading trades for ages, but I realized if I was going to be asking people to buy single issues, I really needed to be knowing what was on the market. You know what I mean? Yeah, there's been a bunch of interesting stuff. One thing that I will mention right now, because I was reading it literally last night, was a Nancy Drew series from Dynamite that's written by Kelly Thompson, and I decided to pick it up because I was like culturally aware of Nancy Drew, like through like pop culture references and stuff, but had never experienced any Nancy Drew, perhaps because of like regionality stuff. But I was like, I know I love Kelly Thompson, and like Belle Detective seems pretty up my alley. So I decided to read it, and yeah, I've just been absolutely digging it. I'm not quite at the end yet, so I'm a little behind on my reading stack, but yeah, if you love mysteries, if you love beautiful art, and just like really genuine feeling character relationships, along with a bit of detective noir, that series from Dynamite is definitely worth picking up.
Okay, cool. Now, I guess, okay, this is time for the boring stuff. Okay, so Matt, where can they find you?
Oh yeah, I'm on Twitter. I am Matthew Groom on Twitter. That's Mathew, only one T. There is Matthew Groom with two T's rather in Australia, but he is the state premier of Tasmania. So if you don't have the right amount of T's, you'll get someone who absolutely just don't want to hear about comics. So definitely get that right. And other than that, sorry, go ahead.
No, I was about to lead you into it. Go ahead.
We have a website, which is selfmadecomic.com, where you can see a trailer for the series, some preview pages, learn more about the team, and get in touch and even send us a message that might end up in the letters column for Self-Made.
All right, and also you do the Ranger Danger podcast. I have to admit, yeah, I
don't know if you've heard.
I have to admit I'm a little behind because you two do so many podcasts a week at this point that
I know you're telling me
that I'm kind of like backlogged just a little bit. But yeah, so Ranger Danger.
That's quite all right. If I could be backlogged, I would be too.
So, Amanda, I guess this is where we should announce that we have like a special series coming up that we don't have a name for.
Yeah.
A special series of Would you like to explain this? Because even though it's my idea, I think you should explain it.
Yeah, I can explain this. So Jamill had the idea that normally what we do is you review full story arcs because it's very, very unfair to judge a story based on a single issue, especially in the case of something like Self-Made, where the first issue is kind of meant to be a bait and switch.
Yeah.
And, we decided to kind of extend that a little bit and look at full series, so something longer than just one volume, something with a beginning, middle, and end, and every month or two catch up on where we are at reading that full series. And because it was my turn to choose, I'm making Jamill finally read Sandman.
That's going to be fascinating.
So,
well, it was fascinating to discuss Promethea, which is a Sandman ripoff, in my opinion, without Jamill having ever read any Sandman.
As far as this new format goes for this particular thing, we planning on doing it the beginning of every month. So, like, a new episode for this, which we don't have a name, let's call it a prestige format for right now, is the beginning of every month starting in February. So February, March, April, we should finish up with Sandman. Then we'll have something after that. That's the plan. So the first one would be up February 3rd, 5th at the latest, and it will be the first 3 volumes of Sandman.
Cool.
That's going to be exciting.
And as far as what we're reading next week or next time, well, this is something that I feel like me and Amanda's friendship has been building up to. And we'll be reading Ghostbusters 101, which is a crossover comic event that crosses over the original movie Ghostbusters with the 2016 Ghostbusters, the all-female cast.
And we will explain the drinking game at the beginning.
Yes, we have a drinking game for this. I gave her two choices in Ghostbusters comics, and I was hoping she'll choose the other one, but I knew she would choose this one, and it's fine. It's fine. So that's what we'll be reading next week. So, I'm Jamill Payne.
I'm Amanda Comey.
And I'm Mat Groom.
And we are out.